Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Win City Investors Club. You know how we do it every Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. We try to bring experts on our show here, and we have a question and answer session with them on various topics of all things real estate investing. We want to bring you the truth about real estate investing. We want to bring you knowledge about real estate investing. We want to bring you information so you can get out this meeting and go do it yourself and have no more excuses, right? So welcome. Thank you for joining us, everybody over here. And for the first time ever, we're actually going live through the Zoom chat. I don't know how that's working. If somebody's watching this live, then drop us a comment if it's working fine and things like that. I know it's 7 o'clock, so most people's internet connections are slowed down because everybody started Netflixing and whatnot, sitting at home, which kind of sucks. But you know, so there's a little bit of lag.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of lag, but I think we'll get through it. Just some housekeeping rules before we start. For those of you who have joined online on the Zoom meeting, if you can mute your mics, that'll be greatly appreciated so we can get rid of any kind of interference, background noise. You can put your videos on. We would really appreciate that as well, because I'd like to take a picture at the end of it. You know, this meeting is being recorded. You can put your video on for a second or so we can take a picture, and then you can put it back off. As long as you are decent, that'll be awesome. Okay. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about multifamily buildings or larger multifamily buildings, and I wanted to bring out my buddy Mark Baltazaar, who is an expert in multifamily residential buildings or the bigger type projects. I actually met Mark at one of another networking meeting in the Burlington area. And at that time I was young and dumb, and I was talking all things good about Windsor. And Mark came to me and said, "Oh, I'm actually looking at a building on Ouellette, downtown Windsor. I think it was a 21 unit or something like that." And we just started talking, and you know.
Oh yes, the bachelors.
Yeah. There you go. You remember that one?
Yeah.
Right? I don't think I'm going to ask you, but I don't think you ended up getting that. But it got me to thinking that, you know, at that time, obviously, I was not running the Win City Investors Club, but now that we have that under control, I said to myself, I've got to bring Mark out here because you have a lot of experience. Mark, you're a flipper. You're a small family home investor, a single family home investor. You know, you do buy and holds, and now you've moved up to bigger things, bigger and better things. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of us out who are beginning in real estate investing, or we have 2, 3, 4 homes in our portfolio, moving up to larger multifamilies is probably the next, is the level up, is the step up, right? So you've done that, and I want to bring you out here to pick your brain on how do you do that, and you know, what advice can you give us? Welcome.
Sure. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And as you can see, I'm kind of in transition from property to visiting some of my properties on the way home. So it caught me kind of right in the middle of the workday. I guess the workday doesn't really end, but yeah, no, really, really excited to talk to you and members of your group about multifamily apartment buildings, kind of probably the smaller class, the 10 to 20 is where we're kind of myself and my company, my partner are really focusing on. But yeah, and it seems like I think it's always been fairly popular, but it seems like there's a lot of discussion around it. And as you said, Savio, as a means of leveling up, it is for some, the next step. And I think, my belief and the belief, the reason why we started some of the, podcasts and webinars that we run is, believe that anyone can get into it. Right. So, the only barrier is really up here, right? It's really kind of a mindset game. And if you can kind of get over that hurdle, then, anyone can get into it. So I'm sure that's what we'll talk about today.
I love it.
I really appreciate you having me on.
Before we jump into it, Mark, you mentioned podcasts. I know you have your own podcast now, specifically for multifamily residential apartment buildings. If you want to drop that link on the chat room over here, that'll be awesome. So anybody who has any ambitions or ideas of getting into it, that's probably the place to start, because I'm sure you address everything that we won't be addressing in this 1 hour call here. So if you can drop that in the chat room, that'll be great. Guys, as you know,
we'll do.
those of of you have been to our Tuesday Talk series before, it's a question and answer session, right? So if you want to drop questions in the chat room, or if it's on Facebook Live, leave a comment. We try and get to those questions with the expert, in this case, Mark, live on air, so you can get answers to your questions and we don't have to keep you waiting, okay? It's an interactive session, so your mics might be muted, but if you can use your fingers and type out some questions, now's the time to do it, okay? If you have any pending, burning issues that you want to discuss, okay? And on that note, Mark, so why don't you give us a brief rundown of your portfolio. So definitely, I know you do single family homes, but let's talk about buildings as well. Can you share like what are you into these days?
Sure. Yeah. So we have 3 in the portfolio. Actually, so with my partner, combined 4 apartment buildings in the portfolio in Hamilton. Primarily, we're just about to close on one in Barrie, a 12 unit that we just went firm on last week. And so that is scheduled to close in July, first week of July, second week of July, actually. And, fingers crossed that, the lenders will close on time, and given the situation that we're in, I think expect delays. There's a lot of delays. We've been cautioned just in terms of there could be potential delays, but we're 2 months out. We've been at this already for about a month in terms of the paperwork and administration side of things. And, so we're hopeful that it is going to, close on time. But yeah, no, I mean, our sweet spot right now is kind of the 12 to 20. So we have, in the portfolio, 12, 14 and a 12. And that's what we're looking at. So we have a few others kind of on the table right now that we're looking at, 20 units, a 16 unit. And we still feel that that's, for us right now, that's a good size. It's a size that provides some synergy, right? From an efficiency standpoint. So from an operation standpoint, once you get past, 11 or 12, then you start to realize, I think, some of the efficiencies that everyone talks about when it comes to multifamily apartment buildings. You have one roof for, let's say it's 12 units. You have one boiler for 12 units. Our specific strategy is the value add strategy. So we're buying things that are, have low, lower valuation. So they haven't been optimized yet. So the net operating income hasn't been fully realized. And our job really is to enhance that over the course of a few years. And the primary way to enhance is through gross rental increases.
Yeah, hold that thought, because I think we're jumping into it, and I want to keep the people waiting a little bit, because that's the meat and bones of what we're going to be discussing today, right?
Sure.
Before that.
Okay, right on.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about. So you said that you have three buildings between you and your partner, 4 buildings, if you will. Between 10 and 15 units, and then you're looking at 21 and so on and so forth. Do you still have single families? Do you still do, you just said you're coming back from St. Cat's and you're doing a flip there. Does that keep you involved? Like, do you still want to do that? Mm-hmm. Why do you do that? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, good question. So I had more duplexes and a 4-plex. And I sold those over the course of the last 18 months to kind of shift capital into multifamily. I still do have a duplex in St. Catharines as well. That was kind of a burr that we still kind of have, I guess picked up maybe 3 years ago or so, still cash flowing. And I still do flips. So I started with flips. In fact, my real estate investing career I started as a flipper, 5.5 or so years ago. Since then I've done over 20, probably at the 22, 23 mark now. And I have, 3 on the go right now. And that's my today cash flow. It's how I generate income today. Mm-hmm. Apartment buildings, generate a little bit of income, but it's not really it's not for me anyways. It's not about income today. It's about income, or it's about wealth for tomorrow. And so why I got into buy and holds in the first place, and now multifamily, is to balance off a little bit of the risk and start kind of building for the future. Flips are very short term, and high risk, high reward. in some cases. But once it's done, then your cash is out, and you know your asset is gone, right? You know, you're just holding cash, which is good, I think, for short term. But for me, anyways, my perspective, it's not a long term wealth building strategy. Some of that capital I use to help with the purchase of, you know, building my own cash. Sometimes it's a mix depending on the property. Some of our own money and some, you know, investor or joint venture partner money. And so, you know, the flip side of the business, you know, is fairly systematized in that, you know, we have a way to get properties, to finance them. I have a partner that's a contractor that deals with all the day-to-day operations of things. So it allows me to kind of really stay out of the day-to-day and kind of stay strategically focused on building the apartment building business.
Yeah, no, yeah, perfect. I love it because, you know, I was going to ask you, but I think you answered already. I'm you know, I want to put myself in the mindset of why would you move from what you're doing, and if it's successful, especially if it's successful, whether it be flipping or buy and hold already on single family or conversions, duplex conversions, why would one want to move that you know, a successful business model to something different, right? Even though I think, again, as we started this conversation, you know, a lot of people say, okay, it's a level up, right? You want to get out of smaller single family homes or duplexes, and then you want to level up, right? But why would you want to do that? But I think you answered that question. You know, in your case, clearly, flipping is short-term gain versus, you know, building your wealth, right? Beautiful. Okay. So on that note, I think the burning question for most people is, how do we do it, right? If so, I have. Let's take an example. I have 4 duplexes. Oops, sorry, something just crashed here. Hold on a second. Am I still live? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh,
I'm still on.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Yeah, so what was I saying? Yeah, so let's take a perfect example. You know, I have 4 duplexes, right? Legal conversions that I've completed. I'm building my portfolio. I've started to hear about larger multifamilies or bigger buildings, and it's teasing me, right? I'm like, okay, that may be something that I want to do, right? But I have no idea. I haven't the faintest of clues about, you know, what to do or what to look at when I'm thinking about investing in a building. So you mentioned something about, you know, adding value and so on and so forth. Can you give us more on that? Why would I want to do that? What should I be looking for, right, when I'm thinking about multifamilies?
I think I think there's a number of different ways to get into, perhaps, you know, apartment buildings. The strategy that I employ is the value add. So buying something that's not been optimized financially, and kind of going, and again, it plays a lot on my flipping background in terms of, you know, redeveloping something, refinishing something, and making it, you know, better and selling it for more value. So basically the same concept, but now into the larger scale. That's just one approach. You know, it's a little more hands-on, at least for the operator, because you got to manage the contractors or construction crew, et cetera, through the transition period, you know, which could be anywhere from 12 to 24 or 30 months, right, depending on the size of the project. But there's also, you know, you could also get into a turnkey apartment building. So a turnkey apartment building is, you know, let's say optimized already, financially optimized, meaning that, you know, the income is as high as it's going to be, right? At least for the current period. Rents are at market. You're maximizing other sources of income, laundry, parking, advertising, storage, whatever, you know. So you've squeezed the lemon as much as you can, or the building operator has squeezed the lemon as much as possible. So you can buy into that, right? Which is a little more I wouldn't say hands-free, but it's a little less hands-on, I guess. So I think the first thing is to decide, the person, you know, as an investor, and the people watching have to decide what kind of strategy you want to deploy, right? You know, how involved do you want to be? What's your skill set? You know, do you have the skill set to manage these, you know, projects, you know, all the way through? Or perhaps, you know, if you don't, maybe there's a partner that you could, you know, connect with, work with to do that kind of work. and I think even before that is why do you want to get into apartment buildings? Like what's it going to provide you? How is it going to help you achieve your goals? And let that, I think, guide which direction you go into, whether it's the value add strategy or the turnkey, or, you know, that might even help you determine what size of building, which market. Like, is it cash? Do you need cash flow right now, or are you building long-term wealth? Because some markets, you know, may provide, you know, cash flow today. Others not so much. Like the markets I'm in don't really provide a ton of cash flow today. They do a little bit, but it's not really a cash. I mean, it helps. There's enough cash flow to operate the building and, you know, covered overages, etc. But we're really building equity with those, you know, the markets that we're in, at least Hamilton and
you're saying it doesn't pay for your luxurious lifestyle that you lead, right? Not for the yacht and the beach house.
What? Yeah, what's that? Which strategy?
I said no. The buildings that you invest in Hamilton area or the GTA area. I'm saying right now, today, it doesn't pay for that yacht that you have at the back of the truck over there, or your beach house.
Yeah, right. It's for tomorrow. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's for they are for tomorrow, right? And then you know, we're coming up to a refinance on one of the buildings now. That's going to provide some capital. Cool. That will go into another project. You know, the flip business keeps my day-to-day kind of income going, and other sources as well. And then the buildings, you know, that's 5-10 years from now, right? I don't really want to kind of touch that capital, and, you know, even the refinance money, it just kind of goes back into other buildings.
You asked the question.
I think back to your question, how do people get stuck?
Yeah, sorry, there's a bit of a lag over here, so we'll have to figure this out.
Okay,
but
no problem.
You asked the question about, you know, why. You got to understand your why. Why do you want to get into it in the first place? Isn't that the simple answer? I mean, I have 4 duplexes. You know, that means 8 doors in different locations, maybe in the same city, but different locations. I got to manage basically 8 tenants remotely or physically in different locations. You know, I got to put out time going to those properties when there's, I don't know, I got to shovel the snow or do the grass or whatever, versus, you know, I have all 8 families under one roof, right, in one location. Isn't that the simple answer?
I think that's part of the answer. I think simplicity, right? I think simplicity and synergy is part of the answer. You know, I think, you know, again, single family, like, you know, the BRRRR strategy might net you more money in the short term. Like, you know, it's, you know, quicker turns, but you know, my opinion is, and I think it's a great strategy. In fact, you know, I still have some, and if a good deal came about, I would perhaps still jump into one. And I think net, you could probably get an annual return that's larger on a percentage basis. But if you compare, and again, not downing a single family, because I have some myself, but if you do if you do a 12 unit building, the net profit from a 10 unit building, it will take you, you know, 5-6 duplexes to get to, right? So you have to see, you know, how much work do you want to put in to net, let's say $1.1 million or $1.2 million, which is kind of what we're looking at typically in these size of buildings from a net profit standpoint. Yeah. So again, it goes back to no strategy is wrong. It really all depends on kind of how, you know, what, you know, life stage and, you know, where you want to generate your wealth. They both work, right? They both work. I've just chosen now to kind of to move into multifamily. I like it. The other big part of it that I really like is the valuation is based on income. And I feel that I have more control over the value of an apartment building because it's almost purely based on financials. Whereas, you know, single family homes are financials as well, but a lot of it's comparables, right? So what did your neighbor do? What do your neighbor sell for? Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. I mean, it really all depends on kind of, you know, where you're at.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
both work.
I think it's a little bit unfair comparison because for most investors in the last 10 years, or maybe even more than that, you know, and looking forward for the next 5-10 years in Canada and in Ontario specifically, you know, home prices are just going crazy, right, through the roof. So, a lot of money or a lot of wealth is created because of what's happening with immigration and the fact that home prices are moving up and so on and so forth. We're super lucky and we're fortunate to be in that kind of environment, right? Where you can compare a single family or a duplex to a multifamily.
Yeah.
I mean, if everything was stable or just minimal growth, you're better off going into multifamily because that's a long-term hold and it's better than having, 5 or 10 duplexes versus one building, right? I think it's a bit of an unfair comparison, but I totally get what he's saying, right? In the next 4, 5, 10 years, for sure, somebody might look at the two options and say, okay, you know what, I want to be in single family because, it's just easier for me. That's what I know. Okay. But you started talking about return on investment and profitability and something like that, and that's what I want to get into. So basically, again, I'm a residential investor. I'm a small family, single family home investor or duplex. I'm trying to get into multifamily. What do I need to know when it comes to numbers, for example? Because I know the valuation is different. I know how you calculate. We talk about NOI. There's this one term I think a lot of investors don't know about. And how things are. Let me ask a simple question. What are the top 3 things I need to know about apartment buildings that I should familiarize myself in today if I want to get into apartment buildings tomorrow?
Cool. So I think you mentioned it, and I guess I mentioned it a few minutes ago, is the biggest driver of value is net operating income, right? So as an operator, as an investor, that's kind of your single-minded focus is how do I drive up net operating income? And net operating income can be driven up in a few different ways, mainly increasing revenues, right? Or decreasing in operating expenses. And so the job of the investor or the manager, the operating partner on a deal is to increase revenue, right? Without at a rate that's greater than the any increases in operating expenses. And ideally, you want to reduce operating expenses over time, right? So utilities, taxes, typically there's not much kind of to do there, but utilities is a big one, right? Financing costs, although that doesn't factor into net operating income, that's more a cash flow piece. But so as a manager, that's the equation that you should have in your mind all the time. So whenever you're doing something, how is it going to improve net operating income? Is it going to improve my gross revenue, or is it going to decrease my operating expenses? Revenue, of course, the biggest contributor to revenue is going to be rents, right? So how do I increase rents? Typically, through turnover. Perhaps there's other sources. Maybe you can add storage. Maybe you can add other unit, right, to be able to legally account for some increased income. Maybe there's advertising opportunities, or maybe there's parking. Definitely keep up with your annual allowable increases, right? That amounts to tens of thousands of dollars in value per year, right? So that's that's the game. The game is improve net operating income is as much as possible, right? To the point, even like I would say, I mean, this is kind of what I do anyways, I will hold out on renting. So I have a unit that we just finished renting, and we're kind of renting it now, or it's being marketed for rent, and we're targeting $1,450, right? And people have offered $1,350. I've had one offer of $1,400, but I'm going to hold out for the extra $50, right? And some people may think, well, that's crazy. Why would you leave a unit vacant, for 1 month, 2 months, maybe even 3 months for the extra $50? Well, because in commercial real estate, that extra $50, which is per month, which is $600 per year, if you multiply that by, or if you divide that by a cap rate of 5%, that's a significant increase. It's $12,000 if I do my math on my calculator, but that's $12,000 in incremental value that you're bringing to the table. I'm just going to quickly do my math here. I don't want to say the wrong number.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mark, for us mathematicians over here, two formulas I think that's important for us to know: net operating income.
Sorry, it is 12,000.
And then cap rates, right? So if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong here, net operating income is your total revenue less your total expenses. right?
Hmm.
But the difference in apartment buildings is that you don't, or at least in your calculation, you don't take your mortgage pay down as part of that, correct? It's just your pure expenses, your pure revenue, rent minus your pure expenses, and that's it. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, your net operating income is before your financing costs.
Okay.
Your net operating income minus your financing costs essentially is your cash flow before taxes.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's how you get your cash flow. Yeah.
Okay. And why do we, so I understand as an investor why I care about net operating income. I mean, I care about it in my duplex, right? Or my single family home.
Of course.
But why
Yeah.
more so? I mean, I think you touched on it a little bit. Why more so in apartment buildings?
Because the net operating income is really what determines the total value of your operation, right? So that in combination with what the cap rate is for, let's say, the market area, right? And think of a cap rate as the percentage return that someone would get on a building if they were to pay for it in cash, right? So that's, it's before financing. So if you were to, in a 5% cap market, let's say in Hamilton, Windsor, again, I'm not so familiar with it. We did look at a couple of buildings there, as you mentioned earlier on. Let's say it's 7%. And I could be completely off, but let's say it's 7% cap rate in the Windsor market, because I know a lot of your listeners in group are in Windsor. If you were to buy, so if a building was a 7% cap rate and you were to buy that building for $1 million, you would expect, you can expect it to return you 7% kind of per year. That's one way to think of cap rates. The other way it's used is it helps determine the value of the asset. So what you would do is, so you take the net operating income, right, divided by the cap rate, gives you kind of the value of your asset, right? So if you did, if your income was, if your net operating income was, let's say $100,000, and I'm just going to quickly jump to my calculator. If your net operating income was $100,000 per year, at 7% cap rate, so you divide it by 0.07, that building is worth $4.28 million, right? So that's kind of how you determine the value. So let's say you buy a building, and today its net operating income is 100,000. But over the course of let's say 5 years, you've now doubled that net operating income. It's now $200,000. Let's say the cap rate doesn't change. You've now that building is now worth $2.96 million, right? So you've increased the value by 1.428 or so million dollars over a 5-year period. So that's kind of just like the little bit of mental math that I think as commercial real estate investors and apartment building investors we look at.
So, here's a couple of questions, right? So I put the example, guys, in the chat notes. If you're following on Zoom, I'm not sure how we're going to do that on Facebook, but I will get it to the Facebook, maybe in the comments after the meeting, if you want to look at those examples. But going back to that, so Mark, the $100,000 NOI in this particular building, I assume if you're looking at the deal, you're probably getting this information from the seller, correct? He's telling you, okay, this is my NOI, or this is what, or you can get these numbers, I guess, because you know the rents, the expenses, or you can ask for the expenses, so on and so forth. The actual cap rate of that city, where are you getting that information from, if you don't mind me asking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, very good question, because it does change by city. It does change by type of building, right? So, and interestingly, it's not an exact science. So there's actually two, let's say two rates, two versions of the cap rate you want to be considering. One, what are lenders in that area for that market, for that type of building? What are they lending at, right? And then the other thing is what are buildings kind of trading at? What are people buying and selling buildings at from a cap rate perspective? So where do you find that? So broad level, you can look at, there's a few different sources, CMHC, .ca or CBRE dot, I think it's .com. There's a Canadian version that gives you macro level kind of provincial wide cap rates. Very, it's average, right? You should talk to your, a realtor that trades, that has a significant business in apartment buildings, because they'll give you an idea of what other buildings have traded for in and around the same time, cap rate wise. Talk to a lender, broker or lender, and see kind of, again, same thing, what are buildings trading for. I also talk to the appraiser that I use for apartment buildings. And what he does is he has all of the buildings he's appraised over the course of, let's say the last 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Similar size that I'm looking at, similar market area, similar condition. And he basically gives me a list of as many that he has appraised within the last 6 to 12 months. And then I'll see kind of an average. And so I'll look at kind of that and triangulate, okay, here's kind of what things are trading. That's what I would do if I was going to a new market, or if I didn't kind of know what things were trading for right now. In the markets that I'm in, I'm pretty in tune with what things are trading for. So I've kind of done what I just mentioned before, but I also keep track of kind of what's being bought and sold on a regular basis. So kind of have a benchmark of what things are trading for. But that's what I would suggest if people are trying to understand. It is an important metric to know.
Yeah, perfect. No, I think you hit the nail on the head, because a lot of people skip this fact when they're looking at apartment buildings, or at least when they're starting to look at apartment buildings. This is a super important formula that you need to know, because I think you can play around with this, right? So, for example, if you want to, you'll get a deal sheet that comes to your table and says, oh, it's 5% cap rate or 7% cap, right? It's a cool term, but what does that actually mean? And if they have the asking price, then you can work backwards and find out the net operating income, right? Or if you have the net operating income, you have the cap rate of the city that you want to invest in. You can calculate, I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, the asset value was probably your offer value, correct? So if I have the NOI, I have the cap rate, I can say, okay, that's my maximum allowable offer, if you will, right? So if the seller is asking for something over that, there's got to be a really good reason why he's asking for that. Am I able to actually increase the net operating value, income, and therefore the cap rate, and so on and so forth, right? Yeah. So I think if you have two of the three components of this formula, it's really going to help you evaluate a deal and see whether it's something that you want to pursue in the first place or not. Correct? Yeah,
absolutely. And sometimes you may come across deals that don't have a price, where they just provide the financials. Yeah. Right. And then you have to be pretty in tune with what's going on and come up with a price that makes, it has to make sense for you. Right. Yeah. And so, so you may come across that. So that's sometimes different than single family, where I can't think of a situation where there wouldn't be a price on a single family home that's for sale, but in some cases in apartment buildings, and the larger you go, and again, we're not playing in a place right now that's over 20, but in buildings that are over 20, 30, maybe 40, 50 units more, they don't have price tags. It's just the financials. And you have to, know your market well enough to put a value on it.
Yeah, no, perfect. Awesome. Guys, if you have any questions on that formula, or why we need to know that formula, I think why we need to know is pretty much answered. But if you have any questions on how you work that formula, please put it in the chat room questions or in the comments in the Facebook Live, and then we'll get to that with Mark. But going back to the actual NOI and the cap rate and the asset valuation, I think isn't this something that the financiers, the lenders are going to look at as well? So if you're coming to them and say, listen, I need, $2 million to buy this building, and it is at a 7% cap rate, they could turn around and say, what are you talking about? This market is not a 7% cap rate, correct? That's why it's another reason why you should know this formula and what you're pitching for.
Yeah, so they will so the way they will operate is and I'll speak to the Hamilton, kind of Barrie and St. Catharines market a little bit because it's the markets that I know the best, kind of just from a metric standpoint. Like for example, so we bought a building, two in Hamilton that we bought it at so the price we paid for the net operating income it was generating at the time was, I think, 4.65 or 4.75 cap rate, right? So the purchase price was 1.7 million. The net operating income was whatever it was, 80,000 or so, kind of in there, right?
Yeah.
Now the lender that we used for that purchase did not value the building at a 4.75 cap. They valued it at a 5 cap. And so that's really important for investors to understand, because that difference, not only do you have to come up with your down payment, which 65%, 70% loan to value if it's a conventional and not a CMHC mortgage. So you're gonna have to come up with 65, 75% of the value, right, that the bank puts on it. Yeah. And then you have to also make up the difference between the price you end up agreeing on with the seller and what the bank values at, right? So and it happens in single family, right? Like if you're buying a house for 600,000, but the lender that you're using to finance it values at 650. Well, they're only going to give you, let's say 550. They're only going to give you 80% on the 550. You have to come up with that X. So it's very similar, right? So, as I talk to people that are looking to get into more to apartment buildings, that's kind of one of the kind of the mental hurdles you just kind of have to get over. Is to understand that the purchase price doesn't really mean much to the lender. They're going to have their own underwriters basically put a value on it, and that's what they're going to lend on.
Can you, Mark, on that note, for apartment buildings, I know we do it sometimes, not to say it's easy, but I know we do it sometimes for single family where, you can get a reappraisal, right? Is that something common in apartment buildings where you can say, okay, you know what, we're not close on our valuation. I want to get a separate appraiser. I want to get it reappraised. Is that something that's common in the commercial sphere?
You know what? I have not done that myself. I have done that, so I can't speak to whether or not it's common. I have not done that. The bank appraises it themselves, and at the end of the day, they'll use the appraiser and the appraised value from an appraisal as a sample, as a guideline maybe, but they're going to do their own underwriting. They're going to do their own work. So yeah, I personally haven't had things replaced because also the appraisals on apartment buildings aren't $300, $400, $500. They're $2,500, $3,000, right? So you kind of and again, it's all the interesting thing about appraisals in single family versus multifamily is in single family. A lot of times it's based on for the most part, I would say, is based on the comparable approach, right? So I think there's a comps, right? And I think, and I've been burned on single family comps before. In fact, it seems like I'm always having a battle with appraisals on single family comps when it comes to purchasing flip properties now. And I find it to be very, very subjective, right? Yes, they have comparables, but are they going line by line and looking at, how things are constructed, the finishes and so forth, the script? No, they're not. Absolutely not, in my experience anyways. Whereas in commercial real estate, it's based on, for the most part, it's based on financials, right? The operating expenses are the operating expenses. The revenue is the revenue, right? It's fairly black and white. Now, there's other things that they look at, of course, but the financial position of the asset is the primary determinant. Does experience help in this case? In the sense that, okay, now you have a track record of, I don't know, maybe you got 2, 3, 4 apartment buildings, smaller units, I don't know, 5 or 6, maybe 7, 10 units in a building. Does the bank say, okay, this guy knows what he's doing, he has experience, he has a track record, he's good for actually increasing the NOI?
and therefore we can value this building at a higher value. Do you see that that's something that could happen, or it's wishful thinking? Again, it's black and white. Here's the numbers. This is the particular building, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a lender will increase their valuation based on track record. At least that hasn't been my experience, and maybe that's the case in larger buildings. But
yeah,
your track record does matter, though. It does matter for the qualification. So in buying an apartment building, they do look at. So I think there is a myth that you don't that the person doesn't personally qualify, or it doesn't matter who's.
Are you bursting
who's
this
the guarantee.
I thought that's what we've been learning all along. Like commercial is not you. It's not you. It's the building. It's the financials. And you're busting this myth right now.
I'm gonna bust a myth.
All right.
It primarily is the build. So the asset is important. It is one of the most important aspects of the things that they look at. But I think about it, and I think this helped me when I started looking at apartment buildings. It's a business, right? So it absolutely is a business, right? So you're operating a business.
Yeah.
So number one, what is the business generating in net operating income, right? Question number one. That's what they'll look at. That's appraisal of the value. But they're going to lend you millions of dollars to operate this thing, as a business and increase its value over time. So they need to know, does the operator have the experience to actually do this? What's his capacity, his or her capacity to do what they say they're going to do? Take this thing over and operate this thing properly. So your track record does matter. Operating single family duplexes in a portfolio does absolutely help, because you're managing a portfolio. You're managing an 8-unit kind of building right now, right? Essentially, right? So they do look at that. They do look at your net worth, right? Your net worth needs to be, 25% of the lent amount, the lending value. They'll look at your portfolio. So they'll look at the debt coverage ratio for CMHC, but they'll look at your portfolio and how your portfolio is performing. So you as the guarantor and as the sponsor or the operator, absolutely you matter, right? Because again, they have to be confident that you're going to be able to operate this thing, right? This business, this asset.
Got it.
So
maybe
it's not just a building.
If I understand, or if I get the picture here, maybe it's not as big or not as important criteria as it is in single family, but definitely a criteria. They're not gonna, the building maybe a home run. They're not gonna give that building up or money up for that building to any Joe Blow down the street, right?
Yes.
So the first one's obviously going to be harder. Okay, to summarize that, the beginning, the first thing that any single family or smaller type residential building investor needs to know, I think most important, is NOI, right? Because we want to increase the revenue, decrease the expenses, increase the NOI, the net operating income, because that has so much impact on the valuation of the building. Correct. The formula is important, guys. You need to know what NOI is. You need to know what a cap rate is, and you need to know basically how do you use the NOI and the cap rate to find your maximum allowable value if you're making an offer, or the valuation of your building, right? So get those formulas in your head and start working with that. I think a good exercise, Mark, if you allow, any deal sheet that comes on the table, that's something that we should be looking at right off the bat. Correct. When you get your potential deals to your mailbox every morning, you're looking at NOI, cap rate, asset value, right? And if these three things work in synergy or not, or if it makes sense. Would that be fair?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you mentioned it earlier too. Where do you get these numbers? The seller provides it. So the seller provides some numbers. Sometimes they're accurate, sometimes they aren't so accurate, but that's kind of part of the due diligence process. The other thing that people need to consider is that you have to look at how the lender is going to value it, as well as how you're going to operate it, and you need to look at both views. Yeah. And why I say that, so when you get from a seller, often you're going to get the income, rents. Let's just say it's just rents for now, and then operating expenses. And oftentimes from the seller, you're going to get, utilities, taxes, insurance, right? As kind of your main components to operating expenses. They typically won't have in there property management, or repairs and maintenance expense line items.
Of course they don't. Why would
Some
they?
will.
Why would they?
That's
They want
right.
to boost that operating income, right?
100%. So you need to add that in. You need to add that in. Not even if you're managing it yourself. The reason why is that the lender is going to add that in anyways. So you need to know, and what that does, right? If you add 5% property management and repairs and maintenance, right? That's going to reduce your net operating income, which is going to impact how much they're going to give you from a lending standpoint. So you got to, so that's one of the things that we see often is people forget to add that in, and thinking that that's not going to be a real expense for them. And it may not be, because they're going to use their time to invest in the building, but the lender doesn't see it that way. The lender needs to look at this thing is that, their position is if the guarantor defaults and I have to take this over, right, as a lender, what are the real expenses that are required to operate this asset?
Yeah, no, perfect. I think you touched a good point over there, which now it slipped my memory. I'm having a brain fart over here. But when it comes to the actual lending, yes, that's what I was going to ask. So when it comes to the actual lenders, are you going with a package, right? So here's my business case. This is what I want to buy. This is the building I want to buy. Here's, all the information that I have, the NOI, where it's coming from, all the expenses, so on and so forth. Are you presenting this to the lender, or is this something that a broker does, or they do it by themselves and they don't really care, what you bring them? Can you run us through that process?
Sure. So I've used brokers. I haven't gone direct to lender, although we are working direct to lender on one of our refinances. So the broker will do that. The broker will package that for you.
Okay.
On our refi, we're going to package that for the lender. So we're kind of going to do the, play the role of the broker in that
Sure.
scenario. So yeah, so if you're working with a broker, they should, a good broker will package it for you and create kind of the story that you're trying to project to the lender. If you're going direct to lender, then you have to create that package and that story of the building.
And are these regular mortgage brokers, or is there special, commercial brokers specifically for larger multifamilies and apartment buildings?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely residential and commercial. I would seek out someone who, and there's some that do both. I would just seek out someone who has done, these types of deals before, has relationships with the commercial lending departments of lenders, because they are different. They look at things differently. So you want to check that out. And there are brokers that, continues to do a lot of business on both sides, the residential and commercial side. But they definitely should have, commercial experience. You should check out for that.
Yeah, definitely. Your power team, of course, as always, is important in this case. So make sure that you're talking to the right people. I'm sure if you get in touch with Mark, he'd be happy to share his contacts when it comes to brokerages and stuff like that. Mark, in the essence of time over here, we're coming close to 8:00 where we want to wrap this up. So here's my question. Here's my scenario. Thanks for all this information. I really want to get into multifamily or bigger multifamily buildings. I'm a residential investor. I got some experience, but I feel that it's still a little bit complex for me. I don't know how to run a multifamily building. I'm sure I could, but I need to learn, right? If I go to the bank right now, or if I try to take on this whole project by myself and they look at me, I don't have the track record. I don't have the experience. Can I still get into multifamily apartment buildings without being 100% investor? Can I be a partner somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're working with people right now that are partners on our deals.
Okay.
That eventually want to do it on their own. They've come in as capital partners, and they're a little. It's kind of a hybrid between passive and active. So they're investing or partnering with us with capital, but we're showing them how here's what we're doing. Here's how we qualified for lending. Here's the stuff we provided. The kind of the behind the scenes stuff that most passive investors don't really want to know about or understand already. But so we are working, and we're getting requests more and more actually every day to partner with people on deals they find, just to kind of be the coach and operator, and kind of help them out. I'll help them out by partnering with them, showing our system. And we're getting a lot of calls and emails about coaching. So at first, my partner Mike and I, we weren't going to go down that path because we want to really stay focused on operations. But the requests and the demand has been pretty hot, kind of given what we've been doing. And so we are going to start opening up kind of a coaching program for people that are looking to get into it, and just show them what we're doing, right? Show them what we're doing, and kind of just open,
That's awesome.
Open the curtains.
Yeah. No, that's awesome for me. As a newbie in bigger apartment buildings, I would take it as paid training, right? Not even paid training. It's because you have an investment in it. You're getting returns on your investment, and I'm getting kind of free education while I'm investing in something that I want to do.
We call it a learn and earn. we just came up with, because it's, you're learning and you're earning a return depending on the project. So yeah, we kind of coined that. I don't know if that term exists, but that's what we call it.
I like it a lot. Yeah. I like it a lot. Learn and earn. Yeah, I love it. So on that note, guys, if you have any questions regarding anything to do with multifamily, I keep saying multifamily, but it's bigger apartment buildings, right? That's what we're trying to address here. If you have any questions for Mark on that or myself, then drop it in the comments box. Drop it in the chat room over here, and we'll try and get that back to you. If not now, then in the future. Mark, when are you coming out here? Are you looking for buildings, or you want me to present you some buildings in Windsor? There's a lot of opportunity.
I'd be, I hear the market's great there. I'd be happy to look at that. So that one, I think the 21 unit that I asked you about, that I saw, I liked it. It was cool. It was good. It didn't fit our model. I think it was a 21 or 25 unit. It was all bachelors. And so that we typically don't kind of play in the bachelor space.
Yeah.
I also, wasn't at the time, and still not so familiar with the economics and such of the Windsor market. But hey, I'm always open to look at opportunities, and it's just, again, we all started somewhere, right? So especially, you have a great network out there, and, so yeah, if there's stuff that pops up, I'd love to take a look at it.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised where, we talked about the cash flow and putting food on the table and, living that good life.
Yeah.
You're probably going to get a really, really good upturn on the NOI because market rates when it comes to rents are just below value, right? And we see that's going up. So, it's going to definitely be the next big thing in Windsor. Absolutely. But cool, man.
Yeah. Cool.
We have a question here. Where do you find off-market apartment Bullion deals? I'm not sure what Bullion. Oh, building deals. Deals. Sorry. Yeah. Oh. Off-market building deals. Good question. That's from Eddie Asamaka. Any ideas on that? Do we find anything?
Yeah. So I think, great question. I would say that I don't know if most. Let me say a lot of the ones that we're looking at are not on the MLS. And I think it's a dynamic of the commercial investing space, or at least the multifamily apartment building investing space, is a lot of times the buildings don't make it to MLS, right? But they do get traded amongst brokers. So there's a selling and buying broker or agent. And it's just that the sellers don't want it on MLS, or, because one, it brings attention to your building, right? People know that you're kind of for sale, right? At least the general public. And so a lot of buildings do get traded, amongst a broker and agent network, that's familiar with apartment buildings. So off market is I'd say different than a single family off market. Like single family off market, typically, if it's not on MLS, you're probably dealing with the seller direct or a wholesaler. Sometimes, an agent might have a pocket deal, right? But it really kind of truly off market, whereas apartment buildings, it's still being traded typically amongst the broker network. Now you can do direct to seller and, send letters, et cetera, to building owners. And that's just a process of this, it's not as quick and responsive as single family, motivated seller type of transactions or marketing may be. But so to answer the question, I think connect with an agent or broker that's, again, very familiar or experienced in apartment buildings. They should be able to, get access to if they're in the business, they will get access to off-market deals for you.
Yeah. I think you said it perfectly. Networking.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I keep
100%.
talking about, that's how we are here, Mark and I,
Yeah.
on this podcast, but this live stream right now
Yeah.
is networking, right? The
Yeah,
importance
totally.
of that cannot be stressed. Don't think anything is going to come and fall in your lap. It's not going to. Anything that's good, you got to work hard for, right? Not to say it's I'm not trying to put you down, Eddie, or say that it's a hard thing or it's not possible. It's all about networking. You got to talk to people and, keep your feet on the street and your ears on the ground, because that's where you hear everything, right? And some things will just happen. Okay. So, so keep looking out for that. I'm sure, Eddie, if you find something, I'm sure you're going to find a buyer on this network in the Win City Investors Club, or maybe Mark himself out in the GTA. On that note, thanks so much, Mark. I really appreciate your valuable knowledge. Hopefully we'll do some deals together. We bring you back on here to see what's happening with your deals. And if you have any options for the group, then by all means, share with us. Everybody who's come online, thank you so much again for our Tuesday Talk series. Next week, we're going to be talking to Michael Dominguez. It's for the newbie investor. Why did we get into real estate investing in the first place? He's going to be talking about how you can be a millionaire by owning just 3 properties. So you don't want to miss that. So come online, register for that. And I hope the live Facebook thing worked. We'll get some feedback from you guys later. But on that note, have a good evening, everybody. Thanks so much.